Okay, so here we are in week 3. We've made it through coming to terms with Joseph Harris, and now we need to talk a little bit about the essay assignment that will come out of that. I'm going to try and keep this video as short as I can. There's a bunch of details to get through. So as you can see on the screen here, this is the description of what we're doing this week. And if you click right here, you can access the handout for the essay assignment. So let's take a look at that together. I'm going to go ahead and download it as a Word document so it's easier to look at. So let's open that. And so I'm not going to read this entire thing to you. You're going to want to look at it in detail yourself. But what we're doing is a rhetorical analysis paper. I know that sounds a little intimidating. All that means is a close reading, not just of what the author is saying in an article, but the way they go about making their argument, the various moves that they make to get what they want from a particular audience. So for this paper, you'll need to pay close attention to how purpose and audience work together. This is a really specific paper that I'm asking you to do. In fact, it's a very basic paper. I'm going to be holding your hand in this assignment. And as the semester goes along, I'll be letting go of your hand more and more. So if you feel a little bit funny with this paper because it's so by the numbers, that will definitely change. Okay, so for your introduction, I know a lot of people struggle with writing introductions and conclusions. This paper will have a kind of fragmentary introduction and conclusion because this paper is serving as the first draft for what will become the second essay when we will fix the introduction from this paper. So really all you need to do is to copy what I'm highlighting here and paste that into your My MLA document. This will be your introduction. What you see in red is simply fill in the blanks, okay? So you would say in whatever article you have chosen from the 2 articles we've read, and the name of the author, in such and such an article, so-and-so writes to, and you will name the audience, so that they do or change some behavior verb, in other words, what the purpose of their paper is. In order to achieve the same, they use 2 moves, move 1 and move 2. Now, this is where some students get a little bit confused. The moves there are from the moves handout, which we're going to look at together in just a minute. Okay, so what I'm asking you to do is to create a paragraph out of whatever you've chosen from the moves handout for move 1, and a second paragraph for whatever you've chosen from the handout for move 2. All you need to do in this paper is write 2 fully developed paragraphs from the moves handout. You need to discuss 2 examples of one category. For example, one of the categories on the moves handout is the use of humor. And so what you would do is underneath move 1, that paragraph would be on uses of humor. And in that paragraph, you would find 2 examples where you see the author using that move for a particular reason. Your job is to identify what move did they use, like use of humor, and then answer the question, why? Why did they use that move? How does that move get them what they want from their audience? Okay, so I highlighted this here because this is the big question. It's actually pretty easy to identify, here's the move the author is making. In other words, that's a what question. What move is the author making? That's actually kind of easy. More difficult, though, is answering why. Why did the author use this particular move? Why did they deliberately choose this move to get what they wanted from their audience? That's a why question, and that's the center of this paper, okay? You're only going to have 2 body paragraphs in this essay. They need to be a minimum of 10 sentences long per paragraph. Your conclusion, just like the introduction, which is kind of fill in the blank, your conclusion will be kind of rough. Think of it as an outline for how you might respond in the next paper. All this paper is focusing on the article itself. Here are the moves I see that author making. In the next paper, you will take whatever you focused on in this paper and try to respond to what the author is saying. So instead of just summarizing what you see in the article, which is this paper, You will then have some kind of response to those ideas and make them your own in the second paper. So your conclusion simply needs to lay out, I call it a working conclusion because it's going to change. It will set up for the next for the next assignment what you will be forwarding or countering in the next paper. You should reflect on what you feel after reading this essay as a student and what possible ideas you could use in your own response to the reading. And this paragraph, which sets you up for the next paper, is a minimum of 5 to 6 sentences long. Remember, the more specific you are in this conclusion, the better positioned you are to write a better second draft. So that's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to email me. Let's jump to the moves handout that I mentioned a minute ago. So let's go back to today in this week in my courses, and there is a link right here to the moves handout. And I am going to download this also as a Word document. And there we go. So again, I'm not going to read this entire thing to you. I'm just going to hit the highlights here. Okay. These, when you are reading whichever article you've chosen of the 2 articles that I have assigned, these are the categories of moves. These here, those are the categories. And then these are specific examples of that category. Here's another category. Here's a category. These are all categories of moves. And your job is, for example, if you choose a choice of materials move, you need to find 2 places in the article where you see these things going on. A choice of materials move is the kinds of sources that a writer uses to develop whatever it is that they want. In other words, their purpose. Are they responding to what others have said about their topic? That would be a materials move. Do they talk about the way other people do things, for example, in their classrooms or in their books? Do they quote, this is the most basic one of all, do they quote other people? If they do, who did they quote and why did they quote them? Do they use jargon from their specific field? A discipline that's called discipline-specific vocabulary. If an engineer is writing to other engineers, do they use language that audience that is designed to reach that particular audience? That's a choice of materials move. Does an author reveal his or her own identity? In other words, do they talk about experiences from their own lives? Do they use pronouns like we or I to create a point of view? For example, when a writer says we, what they're trying to do is show how they are involved in whatever issue they're talking about, and they're including their audience within that particular purpose that they're trying to create. Do they reveal their own expertise, their own perspective, their own bias? For example, if they're talking about an issue dealing with sexism, do they reveal their own gender? Or if they're dealing with a political topic, do they reveal their political beliefs or whatever? Do they acknowledge that there are other possible positions that people might take in disagreement with them? That would be revealing their own identity. In other words, they themselves become a part of what they're arguing. I mentioned this before. Do they use humor? Do they use comedy like humor or parody or sarcasm? These we have not done a whole lot of talking about yet. If you want to try, forwarding and countering are 2 moves that we're going to talk about for essay number 2. If you want to give this some thought before we read those chapters, then by all means, but don't feel like you have to include either one of these in your paper yet. This is what essay 2 will be based on. The way a writer organizes their paper are actually moves. Do they move big picture to big picture, like subject to subject? Do they go small picture to small picture? That would be point by point. Do they order the points of their essay to carry the reader through the journey of the work? Do they use an emotional organization? Do they use section titles? Those are all organizational moves. Also, writers will very, very often use introductory moves at the beginning of their paper to give a sense of what they want and who they want it from. Do they open with a story? Do they open with a quote? That's called an epigraph, a quote designed to express what they want. Do they respond to what others have said? Do they state why this is an important work? In other words, why did they write this particular paper? Are they filling a need that has gone unmet in so far? Do they announce the plan for their paper? Conclusions as well is another place that you can find very clear rhetorical moves that a writer is making. Do they echo their introduction, but now that they've finished their paper, there's a deeper sense of insight? Do they talk about ways to implement the ideas that they have talked about? That would be very similar to proposing a policy. Now, what they might say is, now that we've talked about all these things throughout the course of this paper, here is what I think you, the audience of this paper, need to do. And they propose a policy. They might suggest the limits of what they have been talking about and ask for further research, saying things like, issue X falls outside of the range of what I've been talking about. Maybe someone else can pick that up and go in that direction on their own. It's very common for a writer to reflect on the title of their paper. Again, I did not cover every single move here, and this is simply scratching the surface. This handout is maybe 30 or 40 moves out of almost an infinite number of moves that a writer can make. You can mix and match these. You can say that a writer is revealing his own identity through the use of humor, or their choice of materials is tied into an organizational move, or whatever. In other words, you can mix and match these particular moves. But what you're doing in paper one is you're looking for where you see the author of your chosen article deliberately choosing these moves to get what they want from their particular audience. And once again, as I've said before, if you have any kind of questions about this paper, it's really straightforward. It is simply 2 body paragraphs with a structured fill-in-the-blank intro and a working conclusion that lays out here is how I might respond in the next draft of this particular paper. Again, send me an email if you have any particular questions. So, happy writing.